Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, my precious pack, and welcome back once more to the channel. Glad to have you joining me today as we talk about the subject on the screen, the Torus Dreadnought. It'll arrive in 2 days from now, but what I wanted to talk about today was just the vessel in general. How do I think it's going to play out and whatnot in the game? Don't mind me as I take a drink real quick. So, let's hop right into it and let's talk about the aesthetic while we're on the subject. Well, looking at it. I like how it looks. Generally, it looks sleek and well made, with the exception of all the protrusions, the wings, and whatnot. It looks a little bit like it was whipped together in a scrapyard for some reason. But it has a charm about it that I like, with the exception of the giant horn on the top. It's not a unicorn, so I don't think that belongs there. It's just a little bit odd. While the same could be said about the bottom, it's much more reminiscent to old school carriers. Aside from that, we got the 3D GIF to take a look at, and all I have to say is the vessel looks nice. I can't wait to slap some paint on it though. Stats wise, target wise, everything like that, I'm not going to talk about the targets because I'll actually talk about the targets after I've had a chance to fight the targets on the live server, because anything could change in between now and then, as we have found out before. So, let's go through a few highlights and chat about the vessel in the comment section afterwards. And yes, this is going to be a fairly short video because I just mainly want to talk about it with all of you. So, what are the highlights of the Dreadnought? Well, in my eyes, the first highlight is going to be the built-in energy weapon, because it does direct health damage according to the description. The field slows and deals energy health damage to enemies caught within it. And notable right off the bat, it flies for 8 seconds and then it has 15 seconds, so you got a 7-second period where it's not in the air or able to be fired again. Does 7,500 damage per second. It's okay. Especially for what it does, but against the more durable vessels, it won't be too useful, but it'll be useful in helping clear waves and whatnot like that. Next up that I wanted to highlight was the extremely high durability compared to previous Dreadnoughts. And while that's a good thing, it also is just like all the other Dreadnoughts, and it lacks in durability compared to its own tiers for specialized fleets. In this case, its durability cannot be compared to a fleet of, for instance, switches. They're vastly more durable than it is, but unlike them, it has a built-in resistance stat that is actually omni-resistant. It has energy resistance, kinetic, explosive, alien, plasma, blight. It's resistant to everything with the exception of the nebulas for them as well. But I mean, we haven't seen a kinetic, energy, explosive nebula in a very long time. Kinetic specifically. What else is there? Next up is the extremely high damage per second right out of the gate, with a standard auto build, and by standard I mean this. Yeah, that's probably going to be the one I go with, an opening heavy punch, and then it's going to be mainly brawling. I don't mind that, as it serves its purpose, but I might change it up. I don't know yet, I still haven't decided on a final one, but I'm guessing at the moment. But just like with the durability and the previous Dreadnoughts, its own damage per second can't be compared to a full fleet of its own vessels, of its tier specifically. If you take multiple breakers or multiple deadeyes, they're going to be able to put out more damage than it is, just because of how they're all set up. So just like in the case of the Switch, its damage per second isn't as good as what it could be compared to a single fleet, but it's a little bit of everything rolled in one. It's got durability, it's got firepower, it's got damage resistance, it's got a little bit of flexibility due to its overdrives and whatnot. And the cherry on the top, that I just have to rub it in all over the Imperator's face right now, it has a spawn as the cherry on top. A spawn slot at Mark 1 at that. So you can use the spawns if you want to group up the enemies, so you could just rush in with, say, a spread and heavy AoE build to just mob everything, just wipe them out with a single burst, with the exception of the bucklers, because apparently the AI needed a new version of the Ajax at tier 9, because lack of diversity was something that killed the game in the first place. So the dev team made the AI so it was basically the same thing at tier 9 as it was at tier 8. But moving on, next up we have the robust prime shift mode with a good variety of benefits. I'm not kidding, let's just quickly find them real quick. It gains even more damage per second when the prime shift activates. It gains increased mobility and acceleration. What more could you want for a giant mobile vessel? It just suddenly became faster. And that's not the only thing, because technically this is a part of the bonuses, but this is actually active just for an enemy vessel entering the overlapping firing arc. So basically going in front of it means you trigger this. Theoretically, on paper, it becomes more durable because it's a flat-out defense increase from 90% to 95%, so only 5% of what gets through will damage you. But you still have resistance to everything due to the Omni resistance, as well as any armors you might put on it and things like that, so whatever does get through might be minimal at best. It also gains rotation speed, so it has a little bit of everything sprinkled into it. It's got increased durability, it's got mobility, damage per second, it's got everything that a Dreadnought needs. Well, anything that a Dreadnought would want. And finally, it's interesting to consider all the ways that it can be used. And what I mean by this, let's take a look at the gifts that come along with it. So, we have 2 of them of the radiation missile in action. I'm keeping that in the video. The the missile in action. It's going to be great at clearing waves as well as doing damage to the more dangerous vessels that you can't really one-shot. You might be able to by interacting with the missile ahead of time. So, fire the missile at a target you want to be heavily damaged by the time you engage, you can drop it out of the fight early. And since it's doing direct health damage, so long as that is actually as it says it is, it'll be extremely useful with dealing with the bucklers, because you'll be able to damage them under their shielding without actually dealing damage to the shielding. So theoretically, you could damage them heavily under the shielding without ever having to fire on them while firing on something else. Make sense? I'm just thinking about how all that came out of my mouth. I'm just like, okay. But aside from that, it's going to be great at clearing waves, as we can see. It's going to be great at helping pick off some of the lower tier targets. But I mean, who's actually going to be farming for the Imperator? Because this thing is literally the Imperator, but the way the Imperator was supposed to be via expectations compared to reality. Because, you know, the Imperator could have been better. It could have had spawns. It could have anything. One thing I would like to ask the dev team, if I ever had the chance to get them to answer a single question publicly for the entire player base: why did you give the Imperator Squadrons? The damage per second values of most fleets is so high now that the Squadrons basically launch and somebody just breaks wind in its general direction and the entire squad just gets wiped out. Or they make it to the target and they have basically no health left, which means they have no damage left, so them being launched is completely useless. Now, if anyone tries to defend it and say that they're needed for the overdrives, no, they're not. They could have actually gone about in an entirely different way. They could have made it so that the longer it keeps the target in front of its firing arcs or something like that, similar to what they did with this with the defense right here, with targets being in its firing arc, the overlapping ones. They could have just had it so it ramped up its damage, mobility, and whatnot like that via that. It didn't have to have the stupid little squadrons playing around with it at all. They were not necessary. They could have very easily been spawns, additional weapon slots, additional armor slots, additional shield slots, special slots, any number of slots. But instead they wind up as that being an overdrive. I'm sorry, it's just the fact that they put something that on paper is useless and in practice is basically useless and could be completely replaced by a simple system into the game. It didn't make it any more interesting to play with that ship at all. But thankfully, we don't see a repeat of that with the Torus. It does not have a stupid overdrive that relies on vessels that basically do nothing for it, because again, like I said, they could be completely replaced by a simple system and the fact that most of them can have a long range, you could use them to damage some stuff at long range if they're not destroyed or heavily damaged. But I mean, they will be, because that's just how the game goes. But getting back on subject, the Torus, on paper, is looking like a very gorgeous ship, combat-wise. High health at Mark 1. Damage per second, while not on par with my Leviathan, it's still up there. It has the spawn ships to back it up to help hold targets still, so if anyone wants to build a caliber driver build, go with like low durability or low shielding to cram pack it with all the weapon specials and whatnot to allow it to do everything you need it to, yeah, you're going to have fun with this. Because you'll be able to mostly one-shot most of the targets we're fighting with. And thanks to the spawns, it'll be easy because you can line the targets up as well. And if you get cheeky, here's what you can do. Activate the offensive mode, send the drones out, get the squadrons to round up the enemy, then activate defensive mode and have them lure the enemy right into the mouth of the super weapon. All because of how they set this up. This is just... It'll be too easy to do that over and over, and I mean, it's literally just fishing. Over and over again, just fishing for the targets. You send the drones out as the bait, then you reel them in, and you got yourself an easy target. So yeah, this is exactly what I expected to happen, and the thoughts going through my head are just that it's going to be a blast to play with. But I don't want to talk your ears off too much, because I actually want to talk about it in the comment section with all of you as well, to give you a chance to get your words in edgewise. But on paper, it's looking like an amazing vessel, and we're going to close the video out by just doing a highlight reel of the example builds, as well as an on-screen view of what their statistics look like for what I whipped up and stuff like that, with all of their effective damage increases, armor increases, shield increases, reductions, everything like that. Anything that needed to be calculated is going to be there, with the exception of the increased damage per second to the spawns and whatnot like that. So the minor things. Any of the major things you see right here, yeah, they're calculated and fully there stats-wise. But I'm deeply excited for this vessel. It's the first one I've been excited for in quite a while. And I'm even refitting most of my switches, breakers, and things like that with bypass builds to be able to help farm all of this stuff just a little bit more easily. Because I don't have high expectations of the targets with difficulty or anything like that, because the team has been repeating most of the targets the same as of lately. Most of the targets consist of long-range battleships that spam spawns. Not interesting, pretty boring. And every target has them, so it doesn't really help at all to try and differentiate between them. Every fleet has bucklers that I've encountered so far. Again, it's a different thing of they're not really differentiating the targets, so it's a little bit boring to hit them. And every fleet that I've encountered so far that I've been farming, resource-wise, well, not resource-wise, mark upgrade-wise, they also have the little frigate hunter, the battle cruiser. They basically have the souped-up battle cruiser in them. So, yeah, target-wise, it's been a disappointment lately. So I don't have high expectations of this at all, because this is literally the exact same formula they've had this entire time, and it's just... I wonder if they're actually capable of doing anything different, or if this is just what their capacity's been limited to at this point. But enough of that. Be safe out there, my pack. Happy hunting, and as always, I'll see you later. Well, more specifically, in the comments section.